Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So guys, the speaker is fixed. So hopefully this video comes out to be a little bit better in regards to sound. And I'm always annoyed when there's something wrong with sound, because there's sometimes when I think I do a pretty decent video, and that decent video is essentially marred by the fact that nobody can hear the goddamn video. So this one will be different. Let me check my sound again. At this point I'm paranoid. And yes, right mic, and the sound is at 100. Great. So you guys have heard me say that regardless of whatever your political allegiance is, your political alignment, left winger, right winger, whatever, I don't care what it is, earnest people who are just earnest, straightforward, reasonably honest. Everybody has a certain amount of bias associated with the things that they do, but I'm talking about people who look at it and say, you know what, regardless of our political leanings, I want to be fair and straightforward in pursuant of my political objectives. Meaning, yes, you may win, you may lose, but ultimately we're still playing with clean hands. That's what I'm trying to say. Corruption should not be tolerated. I don't care what the process is. Corruption shouldn't be tolerated. There's nobody who's earnest in regards to doing politics who say corruption is a good thing. I don't know any random person who would say corruption is a good thing. And yet, our politics is ripe with it. Hillary Clinton, the FBI, the Congress is investigating a Hillary Clinton email case. Essentially, they're investigating the FBI's handling of the Clinton email case. Because, like many in this country, they look at this and find, how could you not find a sufficient reason to bring charges here? It just seemed pretty amazing. So they're investigating it. It seems like a little bit of collusion. You had Comey coming out saying that the Attorney General was trying to get him to have a conversation or talk about this stuff as if it's coming from the Hillary camp himself. Comey going so far as to say, I was uncomfortable with the way I was being pressured on these matters. You have another case where elements or people who were making decisions on the case had a financial interest or a financial or a tangential financial relationship with the Hillary Clinton campaign. I mean, come on. Like, when you look at this looks a little sketchy. I'm going to take a look at this article from The Hill. The Hill comes out with an article saying that congressional investigators have found irregularities in the way that the FBI was investigating the Clinton email case. It's like investigation into an investigation. Let's take a look at this. The article is pretty amazing. Some of the stuff we already know. Now, I consider The Hill to be mainstream establishment newspaper. At least online. Yeah, you know, watch both New York Times, etc. But The Hill is not this kind of out there flaming left magazine. The Hill is a down the middle, just centrist magazine. So I don't want you to think that there's some kind of bias against Hillary Clinton in the reporting of this. It's not a bias. When they're doing an investigation, that investigation comes back with certain information. They found anomalies in the way that the previous investigation was being pursued. Now, you had a Democratic president that had a Democratic installed Attorney General. That democratically installed Attorney General working for that particular Democratic president. Are you telling me that there's not an interest in making sure that Hillary Clinton, who was literally the pick for Secretary of State, that there was a good, how can I say this? I'm saying this poorly. If Hillary Clinton is chosen to be Secretary of State by the President of the United States, Democratic President of the United States, that same Democratic President chose the Attorney General who was essentially putting in or creating this investigation into the Hillary Clinton case. Certainly, there is somewhat of an impetus here to not make that investigation, or to lean in a way that doesn't necessarily find cause or pretext in order to open up a wider investigation or some kind of indictment by the FBI. I don't think that's a conspiracy theory. I don't think that's insane at all. What would you expect the Democratic president to do? Wouldn't you expect the Democratic president, or at the very least the Attorney General who's chosen by the Democratic president, and certainly understands that that Democratic president in no way wants the person who he chose to be Secretary of State to be put in prison or to be perp walked. So that particular person will have an interest that goes contrary to putting that person in prison or locking that person up or opening up a wider investigation into the affairs of that particular person, be it the Clinton emails, be it the Clinton Foundation, whatever. She seems to have been protected. That's essentially what's coming out of the investigation itself. Now, and one last point on this. Both parties are political entities. So Republicans are going to politicize this in the same way that I'm making a point that Democrats politicize this. No, the Attorney General is not going to lock up the Secretary of State or the person the President of the United States chose as Secretary of State, particularly when that particular person was chosen by the President. So, yes, they're going to politicize this just based on politics. Why wouldn't Republicans do the exact same thing? I guess I'm making this argument that there was no such thing as a real investigation that took place. The investigation was politicized. Republicans going through this, doing an investigation into the investigation, to some degree, will also be somewhat politicized. You've heard me say, put a special prosecutor on it. If Republicans are going to look into this issue, do they have a vested interest in coming up with damage or something that would damage the brand of Democrats? Yes. Have they been chomping at the bit for the email thing for God knows how long? Yes. Can you trust that any information that comes out from them is going to be flat fact, word of God? We're just being earnest, honest arbiters when we're looking into this stuff. Of course not. They're a political body, so take what's being said with a grain of salt. That being said, the information for the Clinton email thing is public. To some degree, it's public. And we know that, yeah, she did lie in some of the testimony. And yes, those emails were in sources that should not have been in those sources. Meaning, yes, she did have those things in a server in her basement. All of those things are true. We're supposed to believe that Comey, confronted with this information, believed that there was no way anybody else could find enough of a reason to bring charges against Clinton on this. The investigation is finding that to be false. It's finding that to be false. Meaning there was enough information. There was enough data there to come up with a justification for an indictment. Republicans on key congressional committees say they have uncovered new irregularities and contradictions inside the FBI's probe of Hillary Clinton's email server. For the first time, investigators say they have secured written evidence that the FBI believed there was evidence that some laws were broken when the former Secretary of State and her top aides transmitted classified information through her insecure private email server, lawmakers and investigators told The Hill. That evidence includes passage in FBI documents stating the sheer volume of classified information that showed through Hillary Clinton's insecure emails was proof of criminality, as well as an admission of false statements by one key witness in the case, the investigators said. Let's see. There's more to this. Lawmakers on the House Judiciary Committee who attended the December 21st closed-door briefing by FBI Director Andrew McCabe said the Bureau official confirmed that the investigation and charge decisions were controlled by a small group in Washington headquarters rather than the normal process of allowing field officers to investigate possible criminality in their localities. The Clinton email server in question was based in New York. In normal FBI cases, field officers where crimes are believed to have been committed investigate the evidence and then recommend to the Bureau hierarchy whether to pursue charges with prosecutors. In this case, the Bureau hierarchy controlled both the investigation and the charging decisions from Washington, a scenario known in FBI parlance as a special. The lawmaker said, as a special, that's funny, as a special. We're not going to go through normal investigative channels because that normal investigative channels might find her guilty. It might find her guilty. The FBI declined comment on McCabe's closed doors testimony and evidence being shared with Congress. Some Republicans on the committee say the findings of revelations have left them more convinced than ever that the FBI leadership rigged the outcome to clear Clinton. Yeah, I'm not shocked by that in the least. They're Republicans. Of course, they're going to believe that. And this is the problem with analyzing these type of stories. Yes, it is true that Republicans have a vested interest in making this seem to be a really big fucking deal. It is also true that it may be a big fucking deal, meaning just because they're bent politically in a particular way doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. That's what I'm getting at. Both things can be true. There's not, this binary world of yes or no. Both things can be true. Yes, they're political actors. Yes, they have a vested interest in making this to be a big fucking deal. They want to damage the Democrats. But yes, it may also be true what they're saying. Meaning, this looked sketchy from the start. And Comey it's more to this. Let's take a look. Comey pretending to be doing an investigation while Comey wasn't doing an investigation. Meaning Comey cleared her before the investigation was over with. Before he even talked to Clinton, they wrote up the document saying that she was going to be cleared of charges. Even though they had this thing going on with what was pure theater in the primaries, as if there was any chance that Comey was going to actually indict Clinton. Fix was in. I actually agree with Republicans on this. So, let's see. Right here. Some Republicans on the committee said the findings and revelations have left them more convinced than ever that the FBI leadership rigged the outcome to clear Clinton. There was an effort to pre-bake the cake, pre-bake the outcome, said Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida, a House Judiciary Committee member who attended the McCabe briefing before the holidays. Hillary Clinton obviously benefited from the people taking action to ensure she wasn't held accountable. Gaetz said he could not divulge the specifics of what McCabe told lawmakers, but it had left the December 21st session believing the FBI had deviated from its normal objective practices while investigating Clinton. Now, of course, Democrats are going to say the exact opposite of this, saying, no. They didn't, this wasn't indicative of a crime. This wasn't indicative of corruption. This wasn't indicative of the FBI doing anything wrong. They deviated from their normal processes. They gave the quote-unquote special, but there's nothing to see here, folks, and Republicans are making a big deal out of this. That's the Democratic position. But that Democratic position was also baked. Of course they're going to say that. Did you believe, to any degree of belief, that Democrats were going to come out and say, you know what? Yeah, she shouldn't have had access to this information. And how on earth did she get those things in her server in the first place? And if you're going to lock up somebody else, meaning you've locked up other people for lesser things, you're trying to tell me that you can't find reasons. Meaning all of the information that's presented here, you're going to come up with a different process, a singular process. Not the typical process that you typically investigate people. And in this particular special process, she gets off. Now, she didn't get off because there was evidence against her. There was plenty of evidence against her, whether you want to talk about WikiLeaks or whether you want to talk about the emails. She got off. Republicans are not crazy for saying you guys deviated from the normal way you prosecute or go about your affairs and investigations. Why did you go about a different way of investigating this particular case? I don't think they're crazy facts in that question. I guess that's my point. I'm beating a dead horse, but I don't think they're crazy facts in that question. All right, let's keep going. But Gaetz said his panel has evidence the FBI took action while writing the exoneration statement that required justice input, such as immunizing witnesses in June 2016. He said he would like to learn more about what the instructions, sentiments, and communications were conveyed between the department and FBI. I think we have more questions than answers based on what we've learned, Gaetz said. Of course he's going to say that. I mean, yeah, of course he's going to say it's Republican. Let's see. One storyline that emerged is the FBI's own documents stated that there was evidence some laws had been broken, but Bureau leaders declined to pursue charges on the grounds that they could not prove Clinton and her aides intended to violate the law. Those concerns were reflected in an initial draft statement Comey and his leadership team began writing in spring of 2016. The Hill first reported in November that Comey's original May 2nd, 2016 draft included the words grossly negligent, the language supporting a criminal charge for mishandling classified information, but it was later changed to the softer extreme carelessness or extremely careless. Republican investigators said the most glaring irregularities they have found is the decision to begin drafting a statement exonerating Clinton before much of the investigating interviews and evidence gathering was even done. Making a conclusion before you have the key fact witnesses and the subject hearing violates the very premise of a good excuse me, good investigation. You don't lock into a theory until you have the facts. Here, the evidence that isn't public yet shows they locked into the theory and then edited out facts that contradicted it. The GOP lawmaker said, speaking only on condition of anonymity because the documents are not yet authorized for release. The FBI admits it recovered thousands of state emails that originated or passed through Clinton's private server, some of which have been deleted that were never turned over to State Department as government records on Clinton teams. While the FBI believed none of those were deleted intentionally to keep them from the government, the Records Act allows for a misdemeanor charge in each case where the government document is destroyed carelessly, investigators said. So this is Republicans talking about the deletions. Deletions occurred on the same day Clinton's former chief of staff and her lawyer had a call with the computer firm that handled the erasure using an anti-recovery software called BleachBit, Grassley said. You have a conference call with Secretary Clinton's attorney on March 31st, 2015, and on the very same day her emails are deleted by someone who was on the conference call using special BleachBit software, Grassley said. The emails were State Department records under subpoena by Congress. What did the FBI do to investigate the apparent obstruction? Grassley asks. According to the affidavit filed in federal court, absolutely nothing. The FBI focused only on the handling of the classified information. Grassley is making this point that they're giving her a wide amount of berth and latitude to behave a particular way. If it's a misdemeanor to delete emails, and Grassley is saying this was under subpoena by Congress and she deleted those emails on the exact same day, or somebody in her faction, somebody on that conference call, deleted those emails on the exact same day, and those emails were supposed to be government property, and each one of those deletions were supposed to be a misdemeanor, Grassley is making a pretty good point of, wait a minute, if all of these things are misdemeanors and some of these things are actually crimes, and the FBI believed initially that these were crimes, and the FBI changed the way it typically investigated cases in order to have a small section of the FBI to be making a determining factor, which wasn't typically the way that they would go about doing something like this. I don't think Republicans are crazy for bringing this up. My issue with this is that it's been politicized on both ends. Democrats politicize it. Look, you can't prove it, which is the case. They're doing an investigation into the investigation of the FBI. So fucking corruption everywhere. So it's difficult to prove that the FBI was being overtly influenced and politicized. But certainly there's evidence there that the people who are making the determination on whether or not to indict Hillary Clinton on these charges, or to bring up these charges in the first place, it seemed to be leaning a particular way. It seems to lean a particular way. They're trying to go after Trump, saying that him firing Comey was this kind of obstruction of justice. What the hell is this? Fucking deleting emails. And it's like, come on. Yeah, it's like, come on. This looks bad. That's all I'm saying. And this is one of those rare cases where Republicans are making a point that I actually somewhat agree with. This. Corruption everywhere. Yes, corruption is everywhere. Look, guys, I guess my point is, whether you're a Democrat, whether you're Republican, whether you're socialist, whether you're anarchist, whether you're communist, I don't care really what you are. Can we at least agree that corruption is a problem and corruption shouldn't be tolerated regardless of who the person is? If this was anybody else, that person would be under a prison. My issue with this, that's my issue with this, that it seems to be unfairly tilted. If it was Bob Jones, and Bob Jones was being looked at by the FBI under charges that he got rid of and deleted certain emails when he was under subpoena, or for that matter, that Bob Jones had classified documents on his unsecured server, Bob Jones would be under the jail right now. Bob Jones would be under the jail. So first, let's be honest, that there does seem to be a difference between how the FBI handled this case versus how the FBI would handle any other case if this guy was just some random nobody. And let's also be honest that could have that could have been impacted by having a Democratic president that selected an attorney general and that attorney general full well understood that that Democratic president in no way wanted to lock up his Secretary of State. So I'm going to leave the story as it is. This went far too long. This went longer than I would have wanted, but I hope my point is straightforward and clear. Corruption shouldn't be tolerated. And if they're showing irregularities in the way that the FBI handled the case, then it's not insane to say the FBI was politicized. And if you're going to say that there's some connection with Trump and Russia, and you've been digging this ditch for over a year and haven't been able to show anything, then come on. In a case where you actually have evidence and actually have information that's saying that something took place, that the investigation itself seemed a bit bogus, then it's not insane for them to investigate this. The problem is that this gets politicized. That's the problem. If you're going to do an investigation into Hillary Clinton, have a special prosecutor. Take the politics out of it. Otherwise, it's just going to completely look like a politicized witch hunt. So, I'm not against this thing of going after somebody or investigating somebody. An honest and real investigation. I am against witch hunts. I don't like witch hunts. The problem is Republicans aren't crazy here for this. Bob Ramirez says, so in 2018, Jamal is planning to be black A.J. Goodman. That's funny. I don't know what A.J. Goodman's race is. A.J. Goodman may be black himself. I don't know. Adam Sinclair. Oh, I agree that we should. I agree, but I'm just saying the GOP is never going to hold the DNC accountable for cheating their primary. Which is odd to me. I got to be honest. That's somewhat odd to me in and of itself. The only reason I guess the GOP wouldn't do that is because they cheat in the general. I mean, if you're going to have these things like Operation Cross-Check, if you're going to, these stupid-ass voter ID laws and all this other stuff, purely with this idea of cutting down the vote, and then you're going to turn around and say, okay, Democrats did something bogus in that election, then yeah, they're never going to do that. It brings too much attention on their own behavior. So I don't necessarily think they'll do it. I do think they would go after on the emails. If they can show that the prior investigation was bogus and that the prior investigation was somehow, if there were oddities in the way that the investigation was being held, then yes, it would give them somewhat of a pretext to open up an actual investigation into either the Clinton Foundation or her behavior during the State Department, working with the State Department and the Clinton Foundation. If they opened up something like that, they would go after her, but I don't think they would do it under this idea of the election itself, like breaking FEC laws. Election laws, I'm sorry, breaking election law. Dominique Buscemi. Hillary Clinton is a wise and caring woman. Bernie Sanders and his supporters robbed us of a great leader. That is epic level of irony. Not irony, it is an epic level of sarcasm. Tomosi Young. Yep, the camps use both different methods to cheat, but same corporate masters. Agreed. Brahm SO1, cynical girl. I'm so sorry to hear that. You know I'm here anytime you need to chat. Okay. Oh, cynic girl. I've been better. Brahm now. I'm sorry. Like Loretta Lynch interfering. Yeah, I mean, even the meeting, the tarmac meeting, all this stuff looks sketchy. You're overseeing a case, supposedly being the end of the line on that case, meaning you make the choice on the case ultimately. That case is on Hillary Clinton, the former Secretary of State of the United States. In addition to WikiLeaks publishing a huge amount of a trove of information showing corruption in regards to how Hillary Clinton handled her affairs with the State Department, they don't focus on that. They look purely at this idea of her behavior with these emails. Fair enough, whatever. And looking at her behavior with these emails, certain questions come up like, how did she get these emails on her server in the first place? And if these things are in her basement, and this is somewhat illegal behavior, was there an actual investigation into these things? Now, with all this going on, the husband of that woman under investigation ends up meeting with the person who's at the end of the day, the person who's going to finally make that choice on whether or not to investigate her. And we're to believe that the only thing they talked about were their grandkids. You might be putting my wife in prison, but the only thing that we're going to talk about is my grandkids. Okay. I'm massively disbelieving of that. I'm massively disbelieving of that. And yeah, I mean, and by the way, it is interference. So if the Loretta Lynch has a conversation with Comey, now mind you, they're already taking this investigation to a smaller segment of people who are in charge of these things. Meaning, under normal circumstances, you would have more input from, what the crime supposedly have taken place. In this case, they kept this stuff purely at the top, meaning it was a hierarchical decision on this. If Loretta Lynch told Comey, and we don't know all the conversations Loretta Lynch had with Comey, but if Loretta Lynch is pressuring Comey to say, look, when you're having a conversation with the press, don't call it an investigation, even though an investigation is what it is. Call it a matter. Call it a matter. Now, Comey was perturbed enough by this where in his testimony, he says, I was bothered by this. It feels like they're trying to get me to change how I talk about this, as if they're trying to change how I talk about this, to make this more in line with things that Hillary Clinton is saying. This isn't a matter. This is a criminal investigation. So, yeah. The question becomes, how much more pushing was she doing? And is it possible that Comey wasn't telling the extent of the way that he was being pushed on this case? Who knows? Who knows? What I do know is there does seem to have been evidence where if they wanted to prosecute, they could have prosecuted. They made the choice not to prosecute. And the question becomes, did they make that choice purely based on the evidence and the information that was available to them? Or did they make that choice pushed from a political direction? And if so, which I don't think it's crazy to believe that it's so, then the investigation that Republicans are doing is fair game. Not to mention they're not wrong for it. They're not wrong for being suspicious on this front. By the same token, they are Republicans. And yes, part of this is going to be politicized because they want to hurt Democrats. Unfortunately, both of those things are true. Unfortunately, both of those things are true. That's an insult to witches. That's funny. Someone found out that burning too many pages in the fireplace can get out of hand. That's funny. D. Martin, Bernie's revolution consists solely of voting for the Democratic Party again. Uh-oh. We're back to Sanders. We're back to Sanders. All right. I am going to leave this. I have one more story that I want to do. Yeah, man. This email case. I bring up stories like this when I see these stories. It's not because I'm going to HA level. It's more so they want you to focus purely on Donald Trump. And they don't want you to look at them at all. And I think that's a problematic strategy from the standpoint of people who are independents, lefties in the country itself. Ultimately, I think the problem is Democrats. And the problem is needing to be able to see the corruption of Democrats, even while at the same token recognizing that Republicans are batshit crazy. And the same way that I make this point that, yes, it is true that Republicans are politicizing this, but it is also true that they may be right. It is also true that Republicans are batshit crazy and off the spectrum from a political standpoint, if you're comparing us to any other country, or most countries, Western countries anyway. But it is also true that Democrats are corrupt. Whether you want to talk about the bribery, and yes, that's both parties on this case, but in this very specific case, this woman had a server in her basement because she didn't want information or didn't want what she was doing to be available to government's prying eyes. The problem is that information belonged to the United States government. It belonged to us. We're supposed to have prying eyes on it. It's fucking United States government. If we don't have prying eyes on it, how you can make determinations about who you want to vote for, put in that office, and the things that the government does. So yeah, it was a crime. I mean, call it what it is. I guess I'm trying to make this point that it's not one party or the other. The problem is both. And this thing needs to be focused on both. Your ire, you're pissed off about that stuff, needs to be focused on both. And she shouldn't get a pass just because Donald Trump is being investigated for something that they have yet to show took place. If you want to look for real evidence about a crime, I would say look into the WikiLeaks, Hillary Clinton's foundation, or the Clinton Foundation, and WikiLeaks, and pay for play politics. It's there. It's obvious. It's in the open. The email thing seems like somewhat of a red herring. If you want to actually look for stuff that's more damaging, I would say the WikiLeaks documents. But even if you want to stay with the email thing, yes, the email thing looks bad. The email thing looks bad. And it looks like they gave her a pass for political reasons that other people would not have gotten. If that was me, I would be under a prison cell right now. So corruption is not party specific. So I will leave it at that. It's a big club and we ain't in it. Cynic girl, yes. That's exactly true. That's exactly true. That's it. I'm joining the Cleon Empire. Fuck this shit. Brom SL1. Good luck, buddy. You're gonna, when you're going through those rites of passage and they're beating the shit out of you with paid sticks, you'll be back. Dean is the dreamer. Let's just get rid of the party altogether and judge our politicians on their platform. I would love for that to take place. I would love for that to take place. And that should be the position. Sometimes with party politics, people cling to the party without clinging to the values themselves. It's like if you're functioning from a humanistic way, it doesn't really matter what the party does. Your values are what your values are. You vote based on those things. That's not really the way it works in practice. Even when people are against a particular thing, they would still cling together and vote for a particular party under this idea of party line. So, yes, I agree with the party thing. I'm going to end this. I don't want this to go too long because I do have one more left. I hope this one came okay. I felt like I was having difficulty getting across what I wanted to say. But, yeah, I hope this one came out okay. I have one more after this, so I will see you guys in about 15 minutes. If you enjoy the content, feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, guys.